For centuries, there existed an object considered so sacred that direct contact with it meant immediate death, not symbolic death, not divine punishment delayed by time, but instant, physical death. This object was known as the Ark of the Covenant. What makes the Ark truly disturbing is not only what it represented, but the impossible circumstances under which it was built. A people who had just escaped Egypt after nearly 4 centuries of slavery were ordered to construct a mobile object with an extraordinary level of precision. They had no workshops, no refined measuring instruments, no industrial infrastructure, and no margin for error. The Ark was not a monument meant to stand still. It was designed to be carried, transported, and moved constantly through harsh desert conditions. Yet its specifications were rigid. Its length was approximately 1.15 meters. Its width and height were approximately 70 centimeters each. These measurements were not symbolic. They were exact. A deviation of only a few millimeters rendered the object invalid. Unlike other ancient constructions, flaws could not be corrected afterward. Each component had to be produced complete, functional, and final on the first attempt. There was no room for adaptation, improvisation, or trial and error. The command to build the Ark did not come from a council of elders or from an accumulated technical tradition. It came from Mount Sinai and was transmitted through Moses with a level of detail that was highly unusual for the ancient world. Measurements, materials, joints, and procedures were given not as guidelines, but as non-negotiable specifications. Moses did not act as a builder. He acted as the sole intermediary between the design and its execution. He was responsible for delivering a plan that did not allow adaptation to the brutal reality of the desert. The greatest obstacle in constructing the Ark of the Covenant was not the lack of materials or unknown techniques. It was the historical context in which the command was given. Israel had just left Egypt after nearly 400 years of slavery. They were a population trained for repetitive labor, brick production, and mass construction under coercion. They were not a society of precision craftsmen. They had no specialized workshops, no refined tools of measurement, and no infrastructure capable of sustaining a project that demanded absolute precision. Everything had to be done in the middle of the desert, under constant pressure of survival, scarcity, and movement. And it was precisely at the point where the task became humanly impossible that a specific name entered the story. The biblical text identifies a man named Bezalel from the tribe of Judah as directly responsible for constructing the Ark. Not as a symbolic supervisor, but as the technical executor of the project. This choice completely breaks the expected pattern for that historical context. Bezalel was neither a priest nor a military leader. He was an artisan, someone trained to work with his hands at a level of precision rare even in stable societies, let alone in a nomadic camp in the desert. The text states that he was filled with wisdom, understanding, and knowledge to work with gold, silver, bronze, wood, and stone. In practical terms, this combination places him as a master of metallurgy, carpentry, and fine finishing simultaneously. Alongside him was an assistant named Aholiab from the tribe of Dan. This detail is critical. The construction of the Ark was not distributed collectively, nor was it improvised. It was centralized in specific hands with absolute control over measurements, joints, and finishing. This explains why the project did not allow later corrections. Whoever built it had to get it right the first time. Each stage required planning, technical mastery, and silent execution with no margin for testing. Yet even with the right artisan, the challenge was far from resolved. Skill does not create resources out of nothing. The ark required a concentration of materials that simply did not exist in a nomadic camp in the Sinai desert. Pure gold in large quantities, durable wood, and rare textiles were not part of the natural environment. And yet the list of requirements was not reduced or adapted. The gold had to be sufficient to completely overlay the structure inside and out. This meant continuous layers, not decorative plating. Based on modern estimates using the ark's dimensions and minimum viable thickness, the total amount of gold would easily exceed 100 kilograms. For a newly liberated people, this quantity was possible for only one reason: the spoils of Egypt. Before their departure, the Israelites received gold, silver, jewelry, and fine fabrics from the Egyptians, who were attempting to appease the terror caused by the plagues. What seemed excessive at the time became, in the desert, the only viable source of raw material. The required wood was acacia, one of the few species capable of surviving in Sinai. It is dense, resistant to pests, and remarkably stable under extreme temperature variation. It is heavy, difficult to work with, and extremely durable. Exactly the type of material required for an object that would be transported for decades. Fine linen, blue, purple, and crimson threads completed the material list. In antiquity, these textiles rivaled gold in value. All of this had to be gathered, prepared, and processed without waste. There was no possibility of replacement. With materials secured, the challenge entered its most critical phase. The ark was described not in symbolic language, but in exact numbers. These values were not approximate. They were rigid specifications. To achieve this level of precision without modern instruments, ancient techniques had to be applied with extreme care. Knotted ropes functioned as flexible rulers. Simple plumb lines made with stone weights ensured vertical alignment. The acacia planks had to be cut correctly on the first attempt. There was no room for testing. After the wooden structure was assembled, the most delicate stage followed: the overlay of pure gold. Unlike alloys, pure gold is soft and highly malleable. It deforms easily. It had to be hammered thin enough to adhere perfectly to the wood, yet strong enough not to tear during application or transport. The gold layer could not present flaws. Any exposed wood compromised the integrity of the object. Gold was applied both inside and outside, creating a layered structure that drastically increased the ark's weight. Modern estimates suggest the final assembly exceeded the carrying capacity of 2 ordinary people. A gold molding was added around the upper edge, not as ornamentation, but as structural reinforcement. It protected the extremities during constant movement. Nothing in the ark's design was superfluous. Every decision followed functional logic, and nothing could be adjusted afterward. It was this combination of layers, materials, and precision that led some researchers to an unsettling realization. When viewed solely as a religious artifact, many of the ark's details appear excessive. But when analyzed through physical and functional criteria, those excesses reveal a disturbing logic. The ark was not simply a wooden box overlaid with gold. It followed a specific configuration: gold on the exterior, wood at the core, and gold again on the interior. This is not a random combination. Technically, it corresponds to the basic architecture of a conductor-insulator-conductor system. Gold is one of the most efficient electrical conductors known. Dry wood, especially acacia, functions as a natural insulator. In arid environments like the Sinai desert, static electricity accumulates easily, particularly on metallic surfaces subjected to friction, constant movement, and extreme temperature changes. If the ark was transported repeatedly under these conditions, gradual charge accumulation would not be unreasonable. In this scenario, the inner and outer gold layers function as conductive surfaces, while the wooden core prevents immediate dissipation. The most sensitive point of the structure was the lid, known as the mercy seat. Upon it stood two cherubim made of solid gold, molded from a single piece, with raised wings facing one another. In modern engineering, raised metallic extremities are known to concentrate and direct electrical discharge. They function as critical release points. This has led some researchers to cautiously propose a hypothesis that is uncomfortable but difficult to ignore. The ark may have behaved as a primitive form of energy storage and abrupt discharge. This interpretation does not replace the biblical account. It reinforces it. It helps explain why direct touch was fatal, why transport required absolute insulation through poles, why violations of protocol produced immediate physical consequences. It was not merely symbolic disobedience. It was interaction with something that could not be treated as ordinary. Yet even this does not explain everything. The ark was dangerous not only because of what it was on the outside, but because of what it carried within. The ark was designed to contain specific items. The first were the tablets of the law. Not the original tablets broken by Moses, but the second set rewritten after the golden calf incident. These tablets represented the legal foundation of the nation. The second item was Aaron's rod. Once an ordinary staff, it had blossomed overnight during a public test of priestly authority. Stored inside the ark, it became permanent evidence of unquestioned legitimacy. The third was a portion of manna. Unlike ordinary manna, which spoiled when stored, this portion remained preserved. A physical record of continuous provision, law, authority, sustenance. Three foundational forces unified in a single physical point. From the moment the ark began to be transported, it became a constant risk. It could not be touched directly. It could not be carried in any manner. Only specific members of the tribe of Levi were authorized, and only after rigorous purification. Wooden poles inserted into side rings kept the ark suspended and isolated from human contact. These rules were not symbolic. When they were violated, the consequences were immediate. One of the most well-known incidents involves Uzzah, who touched the ark while attempting to stabilize it during improper transport. The contact lasted only a moment. The result was instant death. The mistake was not intention, it was protocol. In military contexts, the ark was not used as a weapon. It was positioned visibly behind the army. It strengthened Israel's confidence and destabilized enemy morale. At Jericho, the ark was carried around the city for 7 days. On the 7th day, after 7 circuits, the walls collapsed. Archaeological evidence suggests the walls fell outward, an unusual pattern for sieges. Yet the ark did not guarantee victory. When treated as a talisman rather than respected under its conditions, disaster followed. It was captured by the Philistines. Thousands died. The object remained powerful. But it did not operate outside its limits. The most dangerous use of the ark did not occur in battle. It occurred in silence. Once a year, on the Day of Atonement, the ark was approached directly in the most restricted space of the religious system. Only one person in the world was allowed to enter. The high priest. He prepared for days. Separation, washing, fasting, purification. On that day he wore simple linen garments. No gold was permitted. Before entering, he offered sacrifice for himself. Any personal failure would jeopardize the entire ritual. The most critical element was the incense. It was not symbolic decoration. It was protection. A dense cloud had to cover the mercy seat completely. Entering without it meant immediate death. Only then did the priest sprinkle blood on the lid in exact numbers. The entire process lasted minutes. No witnesses, no rescue. This ritual continued for centuries. Then, suddenly, it stopped. In 586 BCE, Jerusalem fell to Babylon. The temple was destroyed. Records list the captured objects in detail, but the Ark is absent. When soldiers entered the Holy of Holies, it was empty. No fragments, no melted gold, no record of capture. The Ark had disappeared. 3 hypotheses remain: destruction, concealment beneath the Temple Mount, or removal beyond Israel, possibly to Ethiopia. None have been proven. What is known is this: from that moment forward, the Ark vanishes from recorded history. And perhaps the greatest mystery is not where it went. But what would happen if it were found today? The Ark was not dangerous because it was uncontrollable. It was dangerous because it operated within limits that allowed no negotiation. When respected, it was associated with protection. When ignored, the consequences were immediate and irreversible. The same object, completely different outcomes. Perhaps that is why it disappeared. Not because it was lost, but because it could no longer exist in hands that refused to respect its limits. And perhaps the silence surrounding it is, to this day, the final form of protection.